Drake built an empire on chart-topping hits, cultural influence, and a fan base that crowned him untouchable. But what happens when the very choices that once made you unstoppable begin to tear your legacy apart? This isn't the story of rivals or industry conspiracies. It's the story of how one of the biggest artists of our time may be dismantling his own place in history. For more than a decade, Drake has defined an era. He has broken streaming records, filled arenas across the globe, and remained at the center of pop culture in a way few artists ever have. His story should be one of celebration, an artist who climbed from Toronto's underground scene to become one of the most recognizable figures in music history. But now, a different narrative is taking shape. Whispers of decline, criticism of his artistry, and questions about his relevance are beginning to overshadow his achievements. Fans and critics alike are asking, has Drake reached a point where every new release chips away at the legacy he once carefully built? This isn't just about music, it's about reputation, influence, and the fine line between being remembered as a legend or dismissed as an artist who stayed too long in the spotlight. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who follow the culture. At his peak, Drake wasn't just making music, he was shaping the sound of a generation. Albums like Take Care, Nothing Was the Same, and Views didn't just dominate the charts, they defined moments in people's lives. Every release felt like an event, every lyric instantly dissected and quoted, every beat shift setting trends across the industry. He was more than a rapper. He was a cultural architect, an artist who could blend rap with R&B, borrow from dancehall or Afrobeat, and still sound undeniably like himself. For fans, he was relatable, yet untouchable. For the industry, he was the standard everyone else had to measure against. This was the period where Drake's legacy looked untouchable. He was compared to icons, studied by critics, and envied by peers. His reign seemed secure, his impact unquestionable. But if history has taught us anything, it's that even the strongest empires don't collapse overnight. The cracks are small at first, barely noticeable, until suddenly they can't be ignored. And for Drake, those cracks were about to appear. The first real questions about Drake's legacy didn't come from critics, they came from the culture itself. In 2015, his feud with Meek Mill erupted into one of the most talked about moments in hip-hop. The accusation was clear. Drake relied on ghostwriters. For an artist who built his name on lyricism and authenticity, this was more than just a diss. It was a direct attack on his credibility. Yes, Drake responded with one of the most memorable diss tracks of the decade. Yes, he won the battle in the eyes of the mainstream. But something shifted. The conversation about his artistry would never fully be the same. Then came 2018. The Pusha T feud didn't just wound Drake's image, it exposed him. Secrets about his personal life, questions about his character, and the unforgettable story of Adidon shook his carefully constructed brand. For the first time, the world saw cracks in the armor of a superstar who seemed untouchable. And beneath the surface, another question lingered. Was Drake still an innovator, or had he become a formula, endlessly repeating what once worked? Fans who had once hung on every release began to wonder whether they were listening to growth or just a polished version of the same song over and over again. These weren't fatal blows, not yet, but they planted seeds of doubt, seeds that would only grow larger with each controversial move he made in the years ahead. As the years went on, it wasn't just feuds that raised questions about Drake's legacy. It was his own decisions. Instead of carefully curating his releases, Drake seemed determined to dominate every corner of music at once. Pop features, drill experiments, Caribbean-inspired records, reggaeton collaborations. If there was a wave, Drake was on it. At first, this versatility was praised. It made him unpredictable, adaptable, a true global star. But over time, the strategy started to feel less like innovation and more like desperation. Was Drake setting the trends or simply chasing them? Then came the releases that critics and fans couldn't ignore. Certified Lover Boy was marketed as a grand return, but many dismissed it as uninspired. Honestly Nevermind shocked listeners with its sudden pivot to dance music. A bold risk, but one that split even his most loyal fans. And then, For All the Dogs arrived promising a new era, but instead fueling claims that Drake was running out of fresh ideas. The oversaturation only made things worse, with Drake appearing everywhere, on playlists, on features, in constant headlines. The novelty that once made him special began to fade. Fans who had once waited anxiously for his next album now complained that there was simply too much Drake and not enough growth. In chasing dominance, Drake may have lost the very thing that gave his music weight, the sense that every release truly mattered, and the more he pushed, the louder the criticism became. Drake's music wasn't the only thing putting his legacy at risk. His reputation, once carefully built around charm, relatability, and influence, began to take hits from every direction. The Pusha T feud left scars that never truly healed. The image of a master strategist, always one step ahead, was replaced with something less flattering, an artist who had been outmaneuvered. In hip-hop culture, perception is everything. And for Drake, the perception of invincibility was gone. Then came the public scrutiny. Jokes and memes spread across the internet mocking his persona. Questions about his relationships and the women he surrounded himself with sparked uncomfortable debates. Some of his lyrics, once celebrated for their honesty, were now criticized as immature, even out of touch with the man and father he had become. And while other rappers his age were cementing themselves as cultural elders, Drake seemed caught in a loop, still chasing youth, still chasing trends, still unwilling to step fully into the role of a respected veteran. To many, it looked less like evolution and more like refusal to grow. For fans who had once seen him as an icon, the shift was hard to ignore. Respect, the currency that outlasts chart numbers and streams, was beginning to slip through his fingers. And without it, even the biggest empire can collapse. But perhaps the greatest damage wasn't from outside voices. It came from his own music.
For years, Drake's albums weren't just projects. They were cultural landmarks. Every release defined a moment. Every track seemed destined to dominate playlists and radio. But somewhere along the way, that magic began to fade. Certified Lover Boy arrived with heavy anticipation, but instead of being remembered as a defining work, it was criticized for playing it safe. The production was polished, the features were plenty, but the hunger, the sharpness that once made Drake undeniable, felt missing. Then came Honestly Nevermind, a sudden experiment with house and dance music. While some praised the risk, many saw it as an artist stretching in the wrong direction, searching for relevance rather than cementing greatness. The divided reception was a warning sign. Even Drake's boldest moves no longer guaranteed cultural impact. And then, For All the Dogs, an album framed as a return to form, was met with disappointment. Critics called it unfocused, fans labeled it forgettable. Instead of adding to his legacy, each release seemed to chip away at it. The numbers were still there. The streams, the charts, the headlines, all evidence of Drake's continued dominance. But in the court of cultural respect, numbers don't tell the full story. The question became unavoidable. If the music no longer inspires, does the dominance even matter? For Drake, the risk wasn't just putting out a bad album, it was the slow erosion of what once made him legendary. Today, Drake's position is more complicated than ever. On paper, he remains one of the most successful artists alive. His chart records, his streaming dominance, his cultural reach are unmatched. But legacy isn't written in numbers. It's written in respect, influence, and the way history remembers you. When fans look at artists like Jay-Z, Kendrick Lamar, or J. Cole, they see evolution, careers built on growth, on carefully chosen projects that deepened their artistry. Drake, meanwhile, seems caught in the same cycle, chasing hits, chasing trends, refusing to slow down long enough to craft the masterpiece many believe he's capable of. The tragedy of it all is that Drake's talent was never in doubt. His ability to create music that connects across genres, across cultures, across generations was his gift. But without discipline, without direction, that gift risks being overshadowed by a catalog that feels bloated, repetitive, and increasingly shallow. The danger isn't that Drake will disappear. He won't. The danger is that when the story of this era is finally told, he may not be remembered as the legend he once seemed destined to be, but as the artist who had everything and let it slip away. Drake's story is far from finished. He still has the reach, the influence, and the talent to reclaim control of his legacy. But with every rushed release, every questionable move, every moment that feels more like noise than impact, the window of opportunity grows smaller. The question isn't whether Drake will remain famous. He will. The question is how history will remember him. As a once-in-a-generation artist who evolved into a true legend, or as a superstar who allowed his own decisions to erode the foundation he built. What do you think? Is Drake writing the final chapters of his story as one of the greats, or has he already started rewriting himself into a cautionary tale? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into Drake's legacy, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who follow the culture. Because in our next episode, we'll be examining another artist whose career choices shocked the industry and changed hip-hop forever.